John, is this evacuation from the White House, was it orderly? Did it seem panicky? How would you characterize it?
It started off as orderly, much like we get when there are occasional bomb scares near the White House. But then, again, in the last 10 minutes or so, the people who came out, the last several hundred I saw leaving the grounds, were told and ordered by the Secret Service to run. They were running through the gates. These are, of course, professionals in business suits. I'm also told that prior to that, and we don't know the current situation, that the Vice President and other administration officials on the scene were meeting in the White House Situation Room, which is in the basement of the White House. Whether they have stayed on the complex or not is unknown to us at this moment.
What we're seeing now is that there's information that the aircraft at the Pentagon crashed in a helicopter landing pad near the Pentagon.
Let's go on to David Asman in Fox Central. David?
John, as we've mentioned before, our job right now, the job of the armed forces of the United States, is to prevent any further terrorist attack.
If we can look around behind us, we've got, sir, could you please move a little? We've got a helicopter taking off over there, and what we were told was that this field was being set up as a medevac location. There are at least, scores and scores of, now this one's coming in to a closer vantage point. We've had scores and scores of ambulances in the area here. That helicopter is in fact taking off. He was just circling around to get a better angle of attack on his takeoff.
There are major traffic jams from people who were trying to leave or trying to get in. Obviously, it is a good day to stay put wherever you are.
Right now, looks like National Airport Fire Department is at, or as I can't tell yet, it's Metropolitan Airport Fire Department is putting foam on this side of the Pentagon to try to put out the fire. As of a few minutes ago, there was still a great amount of fire. The fire has lessened somewhat.
All right.
Get a picture up.
All right, Dave, we'll let you go for just a second. I want to tell you the White House has been evacuated. The entire White House.
Not just the West Wing.
Once again, the nation, as we speak, is under lockdown. Our armed forces are taking all necessary precautions to prevent another attack. Those include closing all United States airports as a result of this attack, as you see there, one that occurred about an hour ago, and an attack in the Pentagon as well. We are a nation under lockdown, and once again, we are prepared for the worst, but we are prepared.
I saw the second plane hit. I did not see the first plane hit, but the second plane was an unmarked silver fuselage. It appeared to be twin engine. I couldn't tell if it was prop or jet, and it took a slight bank and went right into the side of World Trade II, and having had the first one go in, the second one obviously appeared to be a suicide flight. So the only thing that we can assume here is that they were both suicide flights going in, and as I said before, there's unconfirmed word that even a third plane was on its way here. The disposition of that, we don't know.
I spoke to an administration official shortly after the president delivered his statement, who said obviously the operating assumption here is terrorism. The initial assumption, this official said, was that this had something to do, or at least they were looking into any possible connections with Osama bin Laden. The administration recently released a warning that they thought Osama bin Laden might strike out against U.S. targets.
Again, the White House has been evacuated after the Secret Service received a credible threat of a terrorist act against the presidential mansion and residence. Again, the AP reporting the Secret Service has received a credible threat of a terrorist threat against the presidential mansion and residence.
Mr. Tanner, we do have more information about exactly where that plane crashed. We understand right now from the AP that it crashed near a helicopter landing pad near the Pentagon. So as far as we know, it didn't crash directly into the Pentagon. From where you are, Mr. Tanner, are you okay? Are you safe?
Well, unless, of course, the plane decides to hit this building, yes, I think I'm very safe.
This is a horrible sight and a scary, very frightening day.
I'm just a little shaken that it has happened.
And I'm not sure when we talk about that helicopter pad, if it's the one that's on the west side where you drive by all the time on the main street, that you can see if there's another one there as well that a lot of folks go by them on a daily basis.
Some witnesses say it appeared to be an American Airlines 757, which plowed into the helipad part of the Pentagon, the 395 side of the Pentagon. Hold on just 1 minute.
All right, we just want to update you in case you have not heard, just turning on and don't know what you're looking at. This is not a made-for-TV movie. This is the real thing.
Apparently, the president. This is the president's plane taking off from Florida, where he had been heading back to Washington to deal with the emergency. Mr. Jaffe, Dave, you had a question?
Well, two things. Number one, I was going to ask Mr. Jaffe, you said you're either based out of Fairfax or your company is down...
we have our company's in New York and in Falls Church,
Virginia. Okay, Falls Church, Virginia. You would very well know, as anyone who flies into the Washington area, what's stunning about the Pentagon attack is the airspace. While we do have a wide open country, the airspace around the Pentagon, the White House, the national monuments down there is extremely restricted. So number one, does it surprise you that an aircraft was able to get into, literally right into the Pentagon? And number two, does it surprise you, since the attack on the World Trade Center back in the early 90s, that this has taken so long for terrorism to once again return to our domestic locale?
If you recall, over the last few years, there have been a number of people interdicted coming out of Canada, coming out of Brunswick, coming across various parts of the northern country, where people have been caught with the components to make the bombs. So it doesn't surprise me that we are the target of an attack. It surprises me that it's taken as long for us to suffer what we've suffered, and it creates a very heightened awareness of what we have to do now. The question becomes, do we sacrifice our complete freedoms in order to not suffer this? There's got to be a balance. But
just to interrupt you for a second, Mr. Jaffe, just want to report to our viewers that we have reports now that the Capitol and the Treasury and the White House are being evacuated in Washington.
You could see it. Some of the flames were beginning to diminish, but what observers noted, and those, they were in the airline industry, so we kind of take what they're saying for... At the word 757 American Airlines, they could see the plane, they could see the markings, crashed into the west side of the Pentagon near the heliport.
This is a live picture we're just getting here. This is the firefighters battling the blaze at the Pentagon. Look.
So you can see the damage.
Years ago, there were a whole host of different groups that started with the Francis Tavern bombing, LaGuardia bombing, and others which we worked on. And then there was a very complete effort, at least in New York City and other places, to penetrate those organizations. I can't speak of what's been ongoing recently as to what we've penetrated, but we might have to sacrifice some of what we have by way of rights, at least to allow intelligence to be gathered so we can prevent some type of tragedy such as this. We need to look at home.
Apparently we got blindsided by this one.
This is just going to be raw tape that Dave Statter and his crew are
just feeding into us.
You can see this apparent terrorist attack. A jet slammed into the Pentagon about 15-20 minutes ago, the helipad side on 395. We have no word yet on casualties.
It's 9:55. We've been on the air since, I would say, 5 minutes after 9, around 9 o'clock, and it's been a harrowing experience for us, just kind of watching this and hearing reports. And
we understand that building has now been evacuated.
Matt, that's true. It is utterly surreal. As soon as word came of the Pentagon incident, we were rather forcefully removed from the White House. The scene was one of administrators, cooks, whatever, running at fairly high speed all the way out of the building through the top gates. Then we huddled for a while in Lafayette Park across the street, and we've been moved now from there a block or so away.
We heard the president call this a terrorist attack. That was before the explosion at the Pentagon. So the president is being fully briefed. He said he had talked to the governor. Now, the governor has an office in the World Trade Center. He was in Manhattan, but we do not know where he is. President Bush has said he has talked to the governor, so we assume that he is safe at this point.
The offices along Jackson Place, which are across the street from the White House and adjacent to Lafayette Park, also have been evacuated. And in the most surreal of this morning's scenes here at the White House, a white plane, a very big jet, was flying an unusual pattern near the White House over Lafayette Park. Very slowly, it made one circle and then
We have not seen it since. There was a lot of concern about what that plane might be, but again, it's only speculation, but most people say that since flights have been cleared from U.S. airspace and it was a totally white plane, looked unusual to all of us, that it was a government plane of some kind.
We should point out that we're looking at pictures, Bob, as you speak, of the World Trade Center because all of the camera crews have been evacuated from the White House as well.
What, if you could take an educated guess, Mr. Jaffe, and say what kind of restrictions will now be placed upon the citizens of this country in order to combat terrorists, things like this?
Well, if we look at airports, our security is probably not the highest of all the countries in the world. And if we're worried about planes and commercial planes and hijacking, we could increase the types of things we did when the hijackings were so prevalent. But if we're looking at small planes and other things, it's very hard to stop that.
When you think about where a terrorist would attack, pick the site that obviously would cause the most problems because there are many communications points in this building, many government offices in this building, and unfortunately many innocent victims in this building. 110 floors of the building, 2 towers. You can only imagine how many people are in the building, trying to get out of the building, will never be able to get out of the building at this point.
Now you can imagine what may be happening or what they think might be happening in some part of the country, that there is somebody else on some aircraft coming from somewhere or going somewhere with evil with evil intentions, and so all aircraft currently in the air over the United States have been ordered to land at the nearest airport.
The reason I said that it was so surreal was that within just about 20 minutes ago, they were still conducting tours. You had hordes of tourists and others still in the White House on tour, lining up outside to get in. There seemed to be absolutely no unusual activity outside the White House until word came of the incident at the Pentagon. So it's been quite a dramatic shift here.
Look, you want to be careful here. We don't want to get too far ahead of this, but obviously this has all the appearances of an extraordinarily well-coordinated and devastating terrorist attack here in the United States.
You know, in terms of responsibility, Tom and Matt and Bob, apparently a senior official from the Radical Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine denied on Tuesday the group had any connection to the plane crash. An anonymous caller had told television that it was behind the crash, but, quote, "I emphasize that the story released on television by an anonymous person is totally incorrect." Tassir Khaled, a senior official from the DFLP Politburo in the Palestinian territories, told Reuters. The DFLP is against hijacking planes and against endangering the lives of civilians who are not connected with the struggle of this region, he said.
There are going to be a lot of claims and counterclaims in the course of the next 24 hours or so. This is a task for investigators of extraordinary magnitude to try to determine who did this and how they got away with it.
And I think it's important to say that we don't know and have no reason to believe that the White House, for example, was facing any immediate or imminent threat. The same is true on Capitol Hill, where it appears they will be evacuating the building up here soon. Nothing has happened at either of those places. Obviously, if you put yourself in the position of officials with responsibility for any of these places, the safe move, in light of what we've seen, is to evacuate places, just as the safe move was for the authorities to close the airports to keep any new planes out of the sky. So I think we have a blend here of things that have really happened, which are chilling in themselves, and things that are happening out of precaution that may or may not denote any particular threat.
You talk about transmissions. I was just curious, have you had any evidence of what was said during those
They're just saying they're
transmissions?
citing transmission to know that the plane had been hijacked. That's all that they're saying about it at this point.
Before this happened at the Pentagon, President Bush went on the air to talk about the response, the U.S. response, in light of the World Trade Center. But again, this is what happened right after he said we were going to hunt down the folks responsible for the apparent terrorist attack in New York City. And shortly after that, this is what happened at the Pentagon in Arlington.